This is a special Walker Cup episode. The Back of the Range Golf Podcast will introduce you to the finest amateur golfers in the United States. Some have competed in major championships, others have won USGA titles, and many have been named All-Americans. The one thing they all have in common? They all want to be one of 10 men chosen to represent their country at the 47th Walker Cup matches at Royal Liverpool Golf Club. This is the Road to Hoylake, presented by AmateurGolf.com. And now your host, Ben Adelberg.
Well, if that introduction doesn't get you excited for the upcoming Walker Cup matches, I don't know what will. As always, thank you to our friend Mitch Phillips for that amazing introduction. I'm your host, Ben Adelberg, and this is our preview episode of the Road to Hoylake, presented by AmateurGolf.com. The Walker Cup will be contested this year at Royal Liverpool Golf Club on September 7th and 8th, and I'll be bringing you in-depth interviews with the young men vying for the chance to represent the United States at Hoylake. We'll feature the best American amateurs, such as the #1 ranked amateur in the world out of Texas, Cole Hammer, the 2016 U.S. Mid-Amateur champ Stuart Hagestad, as well as junior phenom Akshay Bhatia, two-time Sunny Hannah champion Alex Smalley, national champion Brandon Wu, and many more. In addition, I'm thrilled to announce that Julie Williams, managing editor at AmateurGolf.com, will join us during each episode to share her insights and commentary as the pieces fall into place and the final 10-man squad is set after the U.S. Amateur. So if you're a listener of the Back of the Range Golf Podcast, you're already subscribed in Apple Podcast and Spotify. But if you're not, make sure you do that so you can get the information on the latest episodes in this series, and make sure that you're following AmateurGolf.com for in-depth information during the upcoming weeks. As always, follow along on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to see who the guests are going to be on the upcoming episodes. Check out the show notes of this episode for more information. Make sure that you're visiting thebackoftherange.com and AmateurGolf.com in the next few weeks. In this episode, I wanted to introduce you all to Julie Williams. As I said, managing editor at AmateurGolf.com. She follows these guys all year long. I wanted to get her thoughts on the three amateurs that have already been named to the United States team: Cole Hammer, Akshay Bhatia, and Stuart Hagestad. Julie, thanks for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you during the upcoming episodes of the Road to Hoylake. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me to talk about a little amateur golf.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we've spoken and introed this series. We're going to be focusing on the hopefuls that are going to be trying to get a spot on the U.S. Walker Cup team that'll be traveling over to Hoylake, Royal Liverpool. Let's talk a little bit about what your day-to-day is at AmateurGolf.com to kind of give the listeners a little bit of an idea about, you know, your involvement in amateur golf and how you've been following it and covering it for the last several years.
You know, honestly, a big chunk of my day is looking at scores, looking at leaderboards, Googling players, looking at their kind of playing record, trying to get an idea of who's playing well, what experience they have. So, you know, on any given day, you know, the thing that's really cool about our site is, you know, we're just a big database and a listing of all of the amateur events that are going on. You know, so on any given day, there could be as many as like 35, 40, 45 tournaments, especially in the heat of June, July, August. So, you know, I'm just constantly looking at those. I feel like where I learn a lot about the up-and-coming players are, you know, U.S. amateur qualifying just wrapped up. So to me, it's always interesting to see who got through those. You know, those are one-day 36-hole qualifiers to get into the USAM. You know, a lot of times you see some of the top college players, you know, the top players who you would expect to qualify in. But then every once in a while I see a name I don't recognize and try to learn who those players are, you know, and then whether that merits a phone call to talk to these guys and gals and get a backstory and tell a good story on them.
If you're doing all that, then obviously your eyes are laser focused on how this Walker Cup is going to shape up, not just for the U.S. team, but also for GB&I. So you mentioned the kind of the peak of amateur golf during the summer months. There's just invitationals all across the country. USGA tournaments, you know, the U.S. Junior and the USAM. So I know you've attended a Walker Cup. Which one did you go to?
2013 and National Golf League.
So I guess if you can kind of explain, what does your coverage and what does your involvement in amateur golf look like during a Walker Cup year as things are getting close and that team is close to being finalized?
During a Walker Cup year, it's kind of looking at, what player is really on a good streak, in the weeks, months leading up to September when the matches are played. Of course, it's not just a couple of months. It's also, the 2-year body of work. So there are a lot of players who maybe had a good year last summer and improved their world ranking and, maybe haven't won anything. Like I'm thinking about Cole Hammer, right? He had a fantastic summer. Last summer, he won the Western. He was a semifinalist at the U.S. Junior and the U.S. Amateur. He hasn't won anything yet this summer. He did have a good performance at the Northeast. But, it's that kind of thing. So every couple of weeks, putting together a little, we call it like a watch list of here's some of the guys who have been playing well every week, week in, week out, making starts at the major events like the Northeast, the Dogwood, the Sunny Hannah, the Western coming up this week. But also, guys who maybe got into the U.S. Open and made the cut, like somebody like a Chandler Eaton, who you might not have seen coming, and then you kind of keep your eye on that guy and watch him move up through the rankings and say, is this somebody who could play really well at the U.S. Amateur, and all of a sudden he's got a spot in the Walker Cup. So we're trying to do kind of two things in terms of, who is probably a pretty good lock for the team, but also, somebody who might kind of slide in because they had a really good summer leading up to the matches.
Well, and the thing that I kind of find interesting is for the U.S. side, 3 spots have already been awarded to the top 3 Americans in the World Amateur Golf Rankings, I believe, as of July 24th. So that just happened this past week. And, of course, I'm talking about Cole Hammer, Stu Hagestad, and Akshay Bhatia. And looking at these 3 names, looking at their 3 bodies of work, it's almost like you have 3 completely different people as far as you have the traditional collegiate All-American freshman out of Texas in Cole Hammer. You have Stu Hagestad, a mid-am, getting an automatic selection who, obviously, U.S. mid-am champion 2016. And then you have the kid. You got Akshay, who is foregoing his collegiate career, who's only 17. Maybe speak to just what you know about these 3 players and what they can bring to the team.
I feel like when Cole Hammer won the Western Amateur last year, he probably pretty well sealed up his spot in the Walker Cup. And then he played so well at the U.S. Amateur 2 weeks later. So, I've been saying for several months, if there was a lock for the Walker Cup team, the closest thing to it was Cole Hammer. So I think nobody is surprised by that. Even if he didn't earn a pick because he was at the top of the world rankings, I feel like he would have merited a pick by the International Team Selection Committee. So Hammer is a great match play player. He is pretty intense. I love listening to him talk about his game because I really feel like he thinks about shots, and he's trying to shape the ball. And, just even listening to him on the podium last year at the U.S. Amateur, when he got pretty deep into the match play, I mean, he's like poetic, he can talk golf all day long. I think that shows you what's going on inside his head, which is a good attribute to have if they're going to go play links golf. So I'm excited to watch Cole Hammer compete in match play. Akshay, I watched him play at the Dustin Johnson World Junior a couple of months ago. I guess that was back in March, and he won that event. And he's very smooth. He doesn't make mistakes. What was interesting to me is, he's playing in a junior event that week. He was, making his PGA Tour debut a couple of weeks later at Valspar, playing as an amateur, obviously. But it was just funny to see, how his peers sort of revered him. They were all waiting for him on the 18th green, waiting for him to finish. I'm watching him sort of practice at the end of the day on the range, and all the guys are kind of standing around watching him too, and they're wanting to do a long drive contest, and they're, talking about shots that he hit that day. And it was really cool to see him sort of blend into that, junior golf arena, but obviously he has a game where he can compete at a much higher arena. I think he has a ton of experience. He spent a couple of weeks this summer He played the British Amateur. He didn't make the cut to get onto the match play bracket, but he also played the European Amateur. So he got two kind of European golf experiences, which I think will serve him well competing at Royal Liverpool. And then Stuart Hagestad, he is the epitome of, keeping things in perspective and being very calm.
Sure.
I think you probably need a guy like that on a team that's going to have a lot of college players, and, obviously a junior in Akshay. So, I think he will be a really good addition and that he will probably be very valuable in the team room. He's very thoughtful also to talk about golf with. It's also interesting to kind of hear him talk about how he has devoted himself to playing a lot of competitive golf this year, looking at, getting a Walker Cup bid, which he obviously got. And, just making that decision because, he also has a career and he also is getting to the point where, in your late 20s, early 30s, you start to think about starting a family. And a couple things he said at the Players Amateur about seeing some of his peers doing that, and
Right.
he's still devoting a lot of time to golf, just thinking about those decisions that he's making. I think he's, very aware that he's had some cool experiences, and that commitment to golf is definitely worth it. But I think you're right. You have three diverse personalities and diverse games in that threesome. So that's a really solid foundation, I think, to the U.S. team.
Yeah, no, it's going to be incredible. I really would recommend, and I'm sure you'd recommend this too, for people listening that are interested in this team and where it's going to shape up, go look at the World Amateur Golf Rankings. And then when you look at Cole Hammer and you look at Akshay and see how they've established points over the last 2 years, go look at Stuart Hagestad and how he accumulated his points and see the fact that all his points, none of them are college events, obviously. He's a mid-am. And I just think it's probably it's such an impressive achievement to get an automatic selection to be that high up in the world ranking points and not have any collegiate tournaments to your name. I still think that's absolutely incredible that he achieved that.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you. And like he says, too, somebody asked him, do you think you have as much competitive experience as some of these other guys who you're sort of competing with for a spot or who you might be playing with on the team? And he said, year long, absolutely not. But in the summer, absolutely. I play just as much as they do. I mean, just, look at his schedule. He played the U.S. Open. He played the Northeast. He said he had signed up for the British Amateur, but when he qualified for the U.S. Open, that kind of became plan B to play the U.S. Open in the Northeast. Right, instead of the British Amateur and the European Amateur. So he's getting plenty of reps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, and he's also heading down with Brandon Wu to the Pan American Games and going down to Lima, Peru for that. So, yeah, he's going to be super busy. As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, this is just kind of a nice little introductory just to kind of walk everyone through what they're going to be able to expect out of this series for the next several weeks. We're going to have interviews with all the guys that are on the short list for the Walker Cup, guys that have already been named to the team like Cole, Stu, and Akshay, and then guys that are on the outside looking in, but that are right there. So we're going to kind of check in with you on a week-to-week basis and see what you're up to and how you're going to be following these last several weeks leading up to the U.S. Amateur. What are you going to be doing this week? Are you traveling on the road, or what are your plans for this week to kind of stay in touch with the last little push for Hoylake?
This week I am glued to the Western Amateur leaderboard. I will not be at the Western, which is going to be played at Point of Woods in Benton Harbor, Michigan. But I will be watching scoring. It's kind of a grueling week because they play 18 holes of stroke play, each of the first 2 days of the tournament. And then if you're going to get through to that 16-man match play bracket and advance in it, you've got to play 3 36-hole days in a row. The last 2 days of stroke play, you play around in the morning and the afternoon, and then you got to play 2 matches each of those next 2 days. So there's a lot of golf packed into a kind of a short week at the Western. But I think if somebody who is kind of on the bubble, somebody who's kind of in that, range around kind of high 40s into the low 50s in the World Amateur Golf Ranking, wins that tournament, somebody who we'd kind of been looking at, I think you're pretty much securing yourself a pick, if you're the Western Amateur champion, because I think that speaks a lot for where your game is right now and what you're able to do on a endurance test like that. Plus, I mean, you take a look at the field and everybody
Everyone's
who is,
there.
You know, a player. Yeah, everybody's there.
Yeah.
So that's this week, and you know, it's not Walker Cup, but just a little plug for women's golf. Next week coming up is the U.S. Women's Amateur, so I'll start kind of looking ahead a little bit to that as well. And then, of course, the week after is the U.S. Amateur. So the next 3 weeks, I feel like, you know, we are in the heart of the summer amateur season. So this is pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and catch up next time. We have, as we said previously, there's going to be the episodes coming out on this series, The Road to Hoylake, all throughout the next several weeks, leading up to the conclusion of the U.S. Amateur on August 18th. So Julie, great catching up. Really excited that you're going to be a part of this podcast series for the next several weeks, and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And there you have it. Special thanks to Julie Williams for joining us this week and throughout the entire series here at the Road to Hoylake, presented by AmateurGolf.com. I'm your host, Ben Adelberg. We'll see you again very soon to highlight the finest American amateurs that are vying for a spot on this year's United States Walker Cup team.